So, today I'm going to give you all a very brief overview of how the Revest output receiver workflow works. To start off with, we have our FNFT right here. Someone's just loaded it, and it needs to know what information it needs to be displaying to the end user. This is not a normal FNFT. It has something called an output receiver, which acts as a module on top of the core Revest system. So to begin, it sends its call to the on-chain output receiver. And that is the parent contract, which typically has created this, and which will handle its withdrawal, and which will handle any updates that occur during its existence. So in many cases, this is the contract that's going to be holding the ERC 721 if it's locking in an ERC 721, or it's going to be the contract that's handling any of the other functions that an output receiver might need to do, such as depositing to a farm, or handling a derivative workflow. But anyways, it makes its view call to the output receiver, and it calls this function first, get custom metadata. Now that function is very similar to an NFT itself in that it'll typically return a file on IPFS. So in this case, we've got the NFT locking system, and as you can see, this is a fairly long file. I want you to notice these indexes, these encodings. It'll say primitive integer encode address index 4, encode string index 2. Indexes are just indexes in an array, and you'll see what I mean very shortly. The second call it makes is to the get output display values call, and that returns a bytes array. Bytes in this case being just hex code. So it's okay if you don't know what that is. Basically, it's a very low level way of a computer to communicate with itself or with other computers. It's universal. And it can be as large as we want it to, which means an arbitrary amount of data. In this case, we're returning the token URI for the stored NFT. As you can see, we make that call. We return an endpoint to 2 scripts. I don't need to get into the details of that. But if you remember from this file here, we said that we were going to encode our token URI at index 0. And as you can see, it's the very first piece of data encoded. So that actually corresponds 1-to-1. You'll see here we're talking about a script that we're going to use, index 2. As you can see, index 2 arguments gen, that's right there. So you may be following along already, but what happens when we return this is we get a nice long string of hex data. So what are we going to do with that data? Well, that's a great question. We're going to send it back to the front end. And the front end knows how to decode this, and it'll take that live on-chain data and that standardized way of telling the front end how to decode the data for any arbitrary contract written by anyone in the world who wants to use Revest modularity. And it'll display it to the end user. So that's how output receivers work. I hope this was informative. Have a nice afternoon.